What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, the 3rd of October here. And I'm going to actually back up here a little bit. We're down to the last few days staying here. We move into our place on Sunday. And so I just had to get myself a T-shirt from Santa's Lodge, which is where we've been staying. And so I'm looking all Christmassy like here. And I did promise the manager of the establishment that I would show it off on YouTube. And so there we are. And that's the shirt. And so I now have more Indiana shirts than I had Hawaii shirts. It's really weird. When I was living in Hawaii, I didn't buy a lot of T-shirts. And here in Indiana, well, first of all, I'm being sent a lot of T-shirts from people who live here in Indiana, and for which I'm very, very grateful. And but I went out and I actually bought this one. And again, the sticker shock here in Indiana compared, this shirt in Hawaii would have been like $30. And it was like 15 here. And it's just amazing what this place is really all about. And the weather here today is very good. It's scattered clouds. They're unfortunately forecasting thunderstorms for Sunday, which happens to be the day that we are moving our furniture into our new place. So hopefully the weather forecasting system will be its usual inaccurate self here. Anyway, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. I'm still trying to figure out the design on this shirt here, and I've come to the conclusion it represents a Russian weather forecaster who's an expert on precipitation, because everybody knows that Rudolph the Red knows rain, dear. So, anyway. I'm hearing laughter in the background. Does somebody have an open mic? Anyway, all right, so let's get into more serious news here. And again, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. This nonsense about this Ukrainian situation, it's really getting to be out of control here. And let me take a look at this. Everybody's still battling back and forth about it, who did what. And again, this should be Biden's scandal, and the Democrats are trying to find some way to make it Donald Trump's scandal. And they're screaming about his phone call to the president of Ukraine, forgetting that there is actually a treaty mandating cooperation in criminal investigations. So Trump was playing by the laws here. And let's see, I need to skip on down here. I'm looking for something that I forgot to put up on the top. And, okay. And, there it is. Okay, there's my stuff. All right, so we're here back talking about the news. And we're going to be here for 3 hours this time. I promise it's going to be a 3-hour show here. So House Minority Whip Steve Scalise is suggesting that Schiff's early involvement with this supposed whistleblower broke the protocol. And he's absolutely right, because there is a protocol for whistleblowers. They're supposed to go to the Inspector General first before anybody else. And now it has evolved that Schiff was talking to this whistleblower before they went to the IG. In fact, the whistleblower went to the Democrats and said, boy, have I got something for you. And that's a violation. And it's a violation of the law, because the law says that the whistleblowers have to go to the IG before they go to the House Intel panel. So they broke that one here. So Adam Schiff is on video saying that he knew nothing at all about this whistleblower complaint before it was filed. He's on video saying it. Now the New York Times is saying, yes, he did. He did know about it ahead of time. He worked with this whistleblower who's reportedly a CIA agent. They still don't know who it is. But Schiff is basically panicking because of the revelation that he got an early account of the whistleblower's accusations, despite the claims that he never spoke to the whistleblower. I don't know, maybe he used smoke signals. You know, what did Trump do this time? Something like that. Now, Trump, responding to this New York Times article, is basically saying Schiff is a fraud. And he may have helped write the whistleblower complaint, certainly entirely possible here. And so Schiff and the New York Times are trying to do damage control over the fact that Schiff got to look at the whistleblower complaint. And Trump is out there saying he thinks Schiff may have written the whole thing. And other people are saying exactly the same thing. Story out of Natural News. You know, did Adam Schiff pull a Jussie Smollett and fabricate the existence of the whistleblower? And it's kind of interesting because earlier in the week, I made a point of saying it doesn't make any sense. Whistleblowers have been named in the past. Monica Lewinsky, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange. But in this case, no, it's got to be a secret. We got to keep it a secret here. And I remember at that time saying, I'm wondering if there really is a whistleblower at all. And apparently other people are starting to say exactly the same thing. Now, on his show this morning, Rush Limbaugh basically came on out and said that the whistleblower was Donald Trump himself, that Trump wrote this document and sent it on over to Schiff, possibly as a baited trap. I think we can call this one a Rush job, because I think Rush is desperate there. Meanwhile, Rush Limbaugh went off on Fox News saying they should change their name to the Fox Never Trumper Network. And he's absolutely right about that. Ever since Fox changed ownership, they have gone hard left, and they've gone anti-Trump. We don't really have a conservative news network left in this country, and we need one. We need to have balance. So somebody needs to come up with the money to start a conservative TV news network. And by the way, I'm available if you're hiring here. Meanwhile, there's another source over at the Department of State says that the Inspector General has been sitting on an urgent Ukraine matter for 4 months now. So something is being covered up here. Now, here's an interesting little article. This one came out of truthout.org saying that the impeachment inquiry is an opportunity to investigate Trump's finances. In other words, it's a fishing expedition. They're using impeachment, Ukraine. We've got to look into absolutely everything in Trump's life until we find something that we can use to get him out of office. And my first response for that was, why don't we look under the microscope at the Clintons' finances? We know that they got involved in that Uranium One deal. We know that the Clinton Foundation did not donate anywhere near enough money to charity to qualify as a 501c3. Why are they being ignored? Why is everybody so focused on Donald Trump? And again, the only thing that makes sense to me is that after they overthrew Yanukovych and basically set fire to Ukraine, everybody was making money, selling weapons, trading weapons. And they were all part of this group doing all these deals, the Bidens and Loretta Lynch and who knows, and they're all part of this criminal gang that was plundering Ukraine as a result of the war started by the United States. But Trump is not part of the gang, and that's why they're out to get him. Now, there's another report that sort of supports this story. This came from the Gateway Pundit, where apparently Adam Schiff has now been linked to a prominent Ukrainian arms dealer. And apparently, this is why he's willing to lie to the country, accusing President Trump of all kinds of crimes. Remember that huge embarrassment where he read off what was supposed to be a transcript of the phone call with the Ukrainian president. He was called on the fact that it was basically full of lies and misrepresentations, and tried to get out of it by saying, well, it was really a parody. Nobody was supposed to take it seriously. He didn't say that on the floor of the Congress. He didn't say, what I'm about to read you is a parody and a satire, so kick back and laugh and enjoy it. He read it as if it was the real deal. Now, Nancy Pelosi has come on out saying that the Constitution justifies an impeachment inquiry, and then claimed Trump must exonerate himself. There are a couple of problems with that. There is nothing in the Constitution about an impeachment inquiry. There is a process for impeachment on the commission of high crimes and misdemeanors. There is no such thing in the Constitution as having an inquiry leading to impeachment. That really is the job of Congress and the Justice Department here. And here's where it gets worse. Madam Speaker of the House, you need to understand something about the way this country works. There is a presumption of innocence of the accused until proof of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt is provided. Nancy Pelosi wants to go back to Code Napoleon. You're guilty because we say you are, and you're guilty until you can prove to us that you aren't. That kind of an attitude is what got Napoleon into trouble. And Pelosi is now out there screaming that William Barr is now part of the cover-up of Trump's crimes. And she's just, if you're not going along with this, if you're not going along with impeachment, you must be part of them. You must be part of that cover-up, the Trump crime network here. Now, Trump has released a new campaign ad basically accusing the Democrats of a coup d'etat. And he's absolutely right. It's nothing short of a coup, and it must be stopped, and he's absolutely right. And again, truth in advertising here, I'm unimpressed with Donald Trump. I'm very, very disappointed in him. But you cannot vote to impeach a president just because you don't like him, just because he's not part of your criminal cabal. He has to commit a high crime or a misdemeanor. Something like sicking the IRS on his enemies, which Richard Nixon did, obstruction of justice, which Richard Nixon did, lying under oath, which Bill Clinton did. They don't have any of that. They're just out there screaming, we want to impeach just because we want to impeach. Now, the House Judiciary Committee had a very long meeting today, passing a resolution on the impeachment probe rules. So they've come up with the rules for how they're going to do this impeachment proceeding, and it basically came down to a fair trial followed by a first-class hanging. Apologies to Silverado. Now, the polls are rather interesting here because Trump's approval ratings seem largely unaffected by all this screaming about impeachment. It's not getting the traction the Democrats were hoping. In fact, there was a study done up in New York that shows the candidate's leftism is repelling more independent voters than it attracts Democratic voters. This politically correct, gender-neutral stuff is actually driving voters away. Okay. Apparently, polls are showing that a plurality of voters believes Trump when he says it's all a hoax. It's all a plot here. Now, you have to be careful about the polls because they're putting out a lot of polls saying Americans support impeachment, Americans support impeachment. Well, some of the polls say that, not all of them do. And Rosie O'Donnell had a little bit of an embarrassment. She put up a Trump impeachment poll on Twitter and said, do you favor impeachment of Donald Trump? And it went horribly wrong. The vast majority of people came on in and said, no, we don't support that. and so she deleted her little poll there. We ran a poll on whatreallyhappened.com with regard to the whistleblower complaint. I think it is genuine, got 12 votes. I think it is a fake, got 240 votes. And I am sick to death of hearing about it, got 122 votes, of which mine was 1, because I'm sick of hearing about it as well. They're just dragging this on. Right now, another poll is showing 1/3 of Americans are saying cable news is just driving them crazy, because they're getting all of this conflicting, competing information. And as I said the other day, we're literally seeing a war of lies. You've got this side telling lies about the other side telling lies about the first side, and whichever side gets the most Americans to believe them is ultimately going to win. Truth be gosh darned. Now, getting on back to Ukraine, as you know, the DNC, the Hillary campaign, were out there screaming about the Russian attempt to influence our elections back in 2016. I love Vladimir Putin's sense of humor, because a reporter asked him the other day, are you going to interfere in America's 2020 elections? And Putin said, of course, but don't tell anybody. So anyway, a lot of people were saying the real collusion in 2016 was between the Democratic National Committee and Ukraine. And of course, this was denounced as Russian propaganda. It's Russian propaganda. And unfortunately, it's blown up in their face, because the Hill's John Solomon basically kept all the documentation and the paperwork. He's got the receipts, so to speak, for the collusion attempt back in 2016 between the Ukrainian government and the Hillary campaign. Getting on back to Ukraine, and this is going to be the killer, okay? Russia's Novaya Gazeta has published documents that show Ukrainians transferred $3.4 million in criminally obtained money to Hunter Biden's business accounts. Remember what Deep Throat said, follow the money, and we're following the money. So it's going to be very, very hard. Now, you remember the prosecutor who was looking into Hunter Biden, and he was fired, apparently under the influence of Joe Biden. And he has now gone public saying he was told to back off a probe of all Biden-linked firms. And this apparently has got a paper trail to it. And Fox News obtained a copy of Giuliani's notes from this January 29 interview with the fired Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin, in which he claimed that his investigation stopped out of fear of the United States. So, yeah, this stuff really happened. Now, there's this National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine director, Artem Sitnik, was actually recorded talking about helping Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. The evidence is there. It's absolutely dead to rights. So what we have here is this bizarre situation where the Democrats want to impeach President Trump for trying to expose a crime that took place, and then they want to elect the person who actually committed the crime in the first place. And if that doesn't tell you how criminal our entire government has gone, nothing will. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, of course, RBN has their hands out right now. You don't need me to tell you that our nation is descending into complete and utter chaos. You don't need me to tell you that virtually everything coming out of corporate media and the government is a lie to trick you into obedience and out of your money, to trick you out of your votes. to manipulate you, to basically control you. That's how you're being controlled with all these lies. We need to get the truth out, and the only way the truth is getting out is independent media like Republic Broadcasting, and that's why it is so important that you continue to support Republic Broadcasting. And I know a lot of you already have, and our heartfelt thanks to those of you who have already sent in donations or made regular donations. And I hate to be the one to say this, we need more. The equipment is wearing on out, and we're having technical issues that we're dealing with. We don't have any corporate sponsors. We don't have any big money grants coming on in, because usually they come on in and say, we'll give you $1 million as long as you say that Hillary is going to be a good candidate. And we don't want to do that. We're a very honest, truthful, fair broadcaster. John Stadmiller does not tell any of us what to say on the air, and it's one of the reasons why I love RBN so much. I can come out here with whatever I feel like saying, including dumb jokes about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and I will not get criticized over that one. So we do need your help, and you can go help RBN by going to their website, republicbroadcasting.org, and please make a donation. Keep us alive. Keep us on the air. Keep fighting for the truth, because things are definitely going from bad to worse. All right, getting on back to the news here, Rudy Giuliani is considering a lawsuit against literally the entire Democratic membership of Congress over what he sees as an attempt at a coup d'etat. And I agree with him on that one. I still don't agree with him on just how he knew that Building 7 was going to come on down, but that's passing into ancient history. But yeah, it is a coup attempt. They're trying to make it look like it's an impeachment, but they've got nothing to impeach him for. And so I hope Rudy is going to go ahead with his lawsuit. It needs its day in court. The facts have to come out in a court of law under oath, not just this constant haranguing back and forth on Twitter and Fox News and MSNBC about, oh, Trump he's this and he's that and he did all these bad things. Okay, now for the bad news. You may want to sit down for this one. According to the Federal Elections Commission, Hillary Clinton does have an active presidential campaign for 2020, and she is raising money. The campaign is active. It raised $165,000 during the first 6 months of 2019. Now, that's not a lot of money, but it is enough for her to sort of try and leap off and go after some of the big money. So she's in. And I knew she was going to do this all the way back in 2016 when she lost to Donald Trump. She's back. Boy, I hate being right all the time here. Now, there's been a little bit of a victory for Donald Trump out in California. As you know, the California legislature passed a law saying that Trump could not be on the primary ballot unless he released so many years of his tax returns. And a judge has basically said that law can't be enforced. And basically saying, look, Trump is a presidential candidate. They're all presidential candidates. You cannot put conditions on them. So a small little victory there for Donald Trump here. And again, I'm not a Trump fan, not anymore. But I'm supporter of the Constitution and playing by the rules. And what I'm seeing around me are all these politicians, members of Congress. They're breaking the rules left and right. They're letting our nation literally rot on the vine. They're so busy fighting with each other, they can't take care of the country. So anyway. All right, former CIA Director John Brennan reveals he will be interviewed by the U.S. Attorney John Durham in the coming days. I actually saw a follow-up story saying that Brennan has decided he's going to ignore the subpoena and not testify after all. Gee, John, got something to hide? All right, so let's get into the international news here. As you know, we had the United Nations General Assembly in New York this last week. And it presented a perfect opportunity for dialogue and diplomacy between the United States and Iran. And Iran basically came on out and said they're ready to end the nuclear standoff with the United States once the sanctions are lifted. And what Iran is basically saying is they want to go back to status quo ante, which is where the P5+1 agreement is in position. They're subject to nuclear inspections. The sanctions are lifted and everything goes on as it was before. Needless to say, the United States was not interested in that at all. Okay, got to take another break here for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking about the international news. And things are not going very well for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's had a series of embarrassing setbacks. There was the Yemeni cruise missile attack on some infrastructure about a month or so ago. There was the attack on the refinery, which caused a great deal of damage. And then more recently, of course, there was that absolute disaster of losing 3 divisions to the Houthis on the border there. And now, all of a sudden, the Saudi family is starting to have doubts that Mohammed bin Salman is able to lead the world's largest oil exporter after that Aramco attack. Now, something that a lot of people don't remember is that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has an older brother who was supposed to be the crown prince, and there was a big, big stink when he got forced out, and they said, Mohammed bin Salman, he's the crown prince. He will lead us into the future. And apparently King Salman went along with this, who is feeling his age. But right now, the Saudi elites, and that represents basically the top 2,000 members of this family, who are worth about $1 trillion, they're having doubts. And they're looking at some of what bin Salman is doing and saying, we're not sure this is going to work. So bin Salman is now out there asking the United States, help us take control of the Middle East so that we can normalize with Israel. He's back to talking about, we're going to be friends with Israel as long as you help us take out Iran. So that's his latest tactic. And a lot of people in Saudi Arabia are saying, it's time to end this war in Yemen. It's simply costing too much. It's embarrassing to Saudi Arabia because they're starting to lose. And they're saying it's time to let this one go. And of course, that's going to be a problem because it will be seen by the rest of the Saudi family as yet another failure on his part. And we could see Mohammed bin Salman stripped of the crown princedom and have it handed back to his older brother. Or they could put somebody else in there. But right now, things are not looking good for Mohammed. And I think probably looking back on it, he has not made a lot of very good decisions. You know, you get to be crown prince and you say, it's great being the crown prince and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Maybe it's something that comes with having that kind of power. Whether you're the crown prince of Saudi Arabia or president of the United States of America, the power gets to your head and you start saying, I can do whatever it is I want to do. You know, by the end of the decade, we're going to land a man on the moon and bring him back safely to the earth, which John Kennedy promised, and we actually pulled it off. But you get the idea. It gets a little grandiose out there. Down in Iraq, the protests are growing nationwide. There are gun battles in the streets, 10 dead, over 200 injured. Police are firing on the Iraqi protesters. And again, what makes it difficult for the Iraqi police is that under Saddam Hussein, the gun laws were very loose. You could buy any weapon that you wanted. Saddam Hussein was not afraid of his own people. And I remember seeing this video of him coming out from a building for a meeting, and he's surrounded by all these Iraqi people, many of whom are carrying weapons. And there was no Lexan shields. There was no bulletproof vest. He just waved it. He actually got up on the hood of a car to wave at everybody, and they all waved back. They thought he was just great. You could buy fully automatic weapons in Iraq back then here. All right. Meanwhile, Iraq's head of the Popular Mobilization Forces, this is a coalition of mostly Shia militias, has met with U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper in Washington. And what they're dealing with is this sudden spate of Israeli attacks. Now, yesterday, I think we were reporting on the fact that Iraq was saying, look, after all these attacks by Israel on the Syria-Iraq lawn bridge, on Iraqi installations, that retaliation is now legitimate. So it looks like this Iraq militia leader is meeting with the defense secretary for one of two purposes. Either he's going to inform him, we're going into Israel, deal with it, or he's going to ask this guy, can you get Israel under control and get him to stop this stuff? Good luck on that last one. Ever since 9/11, Israel has just done whatever Israel wants to do, and the United States has been powerless to stop them. All right, over in the political side of Israel, apparently the talks for a unity government are faltering. They can't come to an agreement, so they don't have a unity government yet. They don't have any government yet. Netanyahu was given first chance to try and form one, and apparently he has failed. So it looks like it's going to be Benny Gantz's turn. And so now Netanyahu gets to go to court. And his pretrial corruption hearing begins. And basically, they're going to weigh whether to indict him on the corruption charges or not. And I'm willing to bet a shekel he's allowed to walk, because that's the way these things tend to work in Israel. All righty. A lot of people are very, very concerned about a recent incident that happened where a Palestinian prisoner, a detainee, to use the polite word, was arrested by Israeli occupation forces, had to be taken to a Jerusalem hospital, suffering from severe injuries, including broken ribs and kidney failure. Now, this guy, Samir Arbid, 44, and in good health when detained, had been tortured during his interrogation at the hands of Shin Bet agents. And according to reports, the agents had been given permission by an Israeli judicial body to use exceptional ways to investigate. In other words, Israel has now normalized the torture of Palestinian prisoners. And a lot of people are saying that's not civilized, it's a violation of international laws, which it is. But Israel's attitude these days is, we're above international law. We're God's kingdom here on earth. And one day we will rule it all, and you will do what we will say. Venezuela is complaining over the fact that U.S. spy planes are flying over their country without permission. Apparently, they've tracked more than 54 spy planes through the country's airspace throughout September. And apparently, they have got radar systems able to detect what are, in all probability, drones and, well, basically drones here. Okay, here is a very alarming story. In recent years, Pentagon officials have been saying China is one of the main threats to U.S. interests in the world, and as a matter of fact, is seen as a greater threat to U.S. interests than even Russia. And so the Department of Defense has created a whole new office that will focus solely on a potential war with China. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for China is one of 4 DASDs who work under the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs. Now, according to a statement released by the DoD, the new position will serve as a principal advisor to the Secretary of Defense on all things China and will be the single hub for policy and strategy development oversight, authorities, review, and national level interagency integrations aligned to the department's efforts on China. So China's the new bad guy. Here I was thinking I was going to take Claire out for Chinese food for dinner tonight. Can't do that. They'll put our name on a list, like we're not already on a list here. Now, here's a very interesting story, and we have to think about this for a little while, because over in the Middle East, the command and control center of its air operations in the Middle East has been in this long-established base in Qatar. And all of a sudden, the United States wants to relocate the command and control center of its air operations in the Middle East to South Carolina. Now, obviously, that means they want to get it out of reach of somebody's missiles. Make a lot of sense, but it's going to complicate things because from South Carolina to the Middle East is quite a bit of distance, even for radio waves. There is going to be a latency issue on any remote-controlled drones, unless they're going to be leaving some forward controllers behind. But it does seem to indicate that the war with Iran is probably going to be on, because that command and control center in Qatar was in range of Iran's missiles. So they're getting ready. Everybody's getting fired up. Oh, we're going to have a world war. It's going to be so much fun. Except for the people catching the bullets. So, I don't know. Maybe it's time to watch Dr. Strangelove again or something. Or Patton. Alrighty. Iceland has been fined over a Eurovision protest, and apparently the Icelandic competitors brandished scarves with flags during announcement of the final results of the annual event held, and the scarves had Palestinian flags on them. So they're now being fined. How dare you have a flag there that we don't agree with? Just amazing here. Now here's another interesting little story. A former Pentagon official claims he was forced out of his job for trying to stop defense industries from gouging taxpayers for millions of dollars. Now, Martin de Beaumont and Sharon Weinberger of Yahoo News first reported this on Tuesday. Former Defense Department contract negotiator Shay Assad said he decided in October 2018 that he would retire after he was blamed for the Pentagon's failed effort to pay defense companies less money to cover large costs that they incur at the start of their contracts. This is a problem that's been going on all along. This is what made Harry Truman famous. He was put in charge of defense spending. This is before he became vice president and president. And he basically went on out there and said, these guys are just taking our money. They're not producing anything. Of course, the defense contractors did not like that at all. Okay, we have a caller on the line. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, thanks for picking up. I'm calling about a couple things that you've already said, but the first one was the one where the Pentagon has set up an office basically to focus on China. And I wanted to go over how that works, how a bureaucracy of any kind, like this is like organizational theory, basic, but you set up an organization, you have a bunch of people that are dedicated to finding a threat from somebody.
Yes.
And then they, of course, they will do that, like the Office of Special Plans did, for instance.
Yes. Or the witch hunters of Europe did.
Exactly. And then, so they collect all this data and they push that agenda. The agenda gets pushed to the point where then it enters into the procurement process and doctrine, where they set doctrine. How do you beat these threats that we're coming up with? And then the doctrine goes into procurement, and it goes out to the defense contractors on on coming up and designing stuff. So now, from one office, it mushrooms into maybe several large, multi-thousand people companies and all their lobbyists, to the defense industry themselves, and doctrine and policy, and the Army starts exercising against that doctrine. And that's kind of what happens. And that's why when you set up, for instance, an office to fight anti-Semitism, they find anti-Semitism anywhere.
Yes.
Right? Because that's what they're there for, or which they did in the State Department, of course, or so on and so forth. And the other one was, it is alarming that we pulled back a headquarters from Qatar, where, command and control couldn't be taken out by a local strike, a counter-strike, really. And there's some bad stuff going on here, Mike.
Yeah, there is. There really is. Now, here's the reality. I know that they're getting ready to have a conflict over the South China Sea and all those islands and all that petroleum down there. The United States cannot physically invade China. They've got way too many people in uniform. China is a nuclear-armed nation. And so I don't know what the DOD is planning on doing with this Office of China Policy, but I think it probably has to do with those islands in the South China Sea. They basically want to take the South China Sea away from China.
Well, there was a picture. I don't know if you ran it or not, but a couple days ago when we sent the carrier through the Taiwan Straits.
Yes.
There was a picture that somebody ran of. It was just surrounded by Chinese frigates and destroyers and Chinese naval vessels, and just as it's exactly what we would do if they went into the Florida Straits,
Yes.
Or what have you,
or the Gulf of Mexico.
That's right, and it's all this is self-fulfilling prophecy, and then we're not trading with them. So now the people who in the past in the United States would have brought their influence to bear in order to have peaceful relations with China, they're muted because they're no longer making money, and so
they're getting angry here. The question I would have here is the U.S. really crazy enough to go to war with China over Taiwan? And I would hope cooler heads were going to prevail on that particular issue. I mean, Taiwan's got a lot of high technology. They've got a good economy. But trying to take it away from China, or for that matter, Hong Kong, I think it's a fool's errand. Anyway, Peter, stay on the line. We got to take another break for commercials. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, over the break, I was thinking about what you were saying, and it doesn't make sense that the United States is going to risk war with China over the South China Sea or Hong Kong or Taiwan. I think you've absolutely nailed it. This is just another way of generating a new demand, if you will, for more weapons to be paid for by the already overtaxed American taxpayer.
Well, the next step, Mike, will be for the intelligence agencies to follow suit and increase the people they have focused on China. Then they'll come up, all these people dedicated to having things wrong will come up with more reasons, and then the Defense Department will start writing its estimates and its needs, and that's when it gets into doctrine. Doctrine will change, and you have to buy equipment to carry out the doctrine, and then the foreign policy. I mean, everything. It's just
and then it'll just sit there and rust because it'll never get used. I mean, look back at the original Cold War and all the weapons that were built, to keep the Soviets away. None of the stuff ever got used. It's all sitting in the boneyard out there in the Arizona desert.
Yeah, that's right. It is. It's just one thing after another, feeding the military-industrial complex. And the other story that you said already about them firing the guy who's saying that the defense contractors were cheating the government.
Yeah,
of course they are. Of course they are. And but then the guy's fired for saying that. Harry Truman, that got him the vice presidency in World War II.
Yes, it did.
Uncovering
It absolutely
misconduct by contractors. Yeah.
And again, I want to recommend to people, there's a movie called The Pentagon Wars, and it's based on the true story of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, and it's based on a book that was written by the guy who went through this about it's a racket. It is a racket to keep you scared of all these enemies around the world that are coming to kill you in your bed at night. And the only thing that will save you is if you give more of your money to the military-industrial complex so that they can build wonderful weapons like the F-35, which the Germans can now track on radar, the F-22, which the Russians can now track on radar, the Gerald R. Ford, which still can't launch its catapults correctly, the Zumwalt stealth destroyer, which turns out not to be all that stealthy, and on and on and on.
Mike, did you see the thing, speaking of the Germans, tracking the stealth? They did it from a pony farm.
Yes.
Some group did it from a pony farm in Germany. They tracked it for over 100 miles.
Yes. Well, the way it worked, the reason they use the pony farm is their system does not use active emitters, which makes it very, very hard, to locate and kill these radar systems. What the system does, it listens to ambient radio noise, AM, FM radio, TV stations, police radios, whatever, and it just looks for sudden changes in the reflectivity of the signal it's picking up, and that's where it knows where the stealth aircraft is.
Did you ever see the movie Battleship? Mike?
Yeah, it was filmed right in front of where I lived in Hawaii here. Anyway, listen, Peter, I got to let you go. We got to do a station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. This is hour number 2 of our 3-hour show today. So, John, relax. You don't have to panic about that little goof that we had here yesterday. All right, let's talk about the economic news here a little bit. Gold consolidates at $1,500 an ounce. Stocks fall on fragile global economic vulnerability. Now, earlier today, the stock market was, last night they were predicting, the Dow futures, it's going to be up 19 whole points, and it actually sank 200, which meant the total losses for the last 3 days for the Dow were over 1,000. But the plunge protection team got in there and did what they were doing, and they got it back up into the green just barely in time for the close. I don't know that that's going to convince anybody. I think we're close to a panic here. It's a good thing that those windows on those buildings on Wall Street can't open, or it would be raining stockbrokers all over the place here. All righty, interesting little story, this coming out of YouTube. It's a YouTube video basically talking about how Russia is dumping the US dollar. And they're dumping it for gold. Very smart thing to do with gold going up. They're also dumping it for the Chinese yuan. So China and Russia are definitely growing closer together economically. And I'm kind of wondering, who's buying these US dollars? Federal Reserve just creating more money out of thin air and saying, yeah, we'll buy the treasuries, we'll buy all this stuff here. As long as we can print the money with impunity, everything's going to be fine. Well, that doesn't last. It really doesn't. And the Bretton Woods Agreement was proof of that. At the end of World War II, Great Britain lost its role as the reserve currency of the world. The British pound sterling was supposed to be the envy of the world, and they had to hand it off to the US dollar. What happens if we lose this next war? If we lose World War III, the dollar will not be king anymore. Now, the US apparently is getting ready to hit the European Union with tariffs of 10% on aircraft and 25% on other goods, including industrial and agricultural products. Supposedly, this is part of a World Trade Organization penalty in a long-running aircraft subsidy case. Now, the aircraft duty does not apply to aircraft parts, which is sparing Airbus production in Alabama from higher costs, as well as Boeing Company's use of European parts in its U.S. production. But everybody's tinkering with trade all over the globe here. Whatever happened to build the best product at the best price as the key to success in commerce? It seems to have gone away. And we have too many people in government who are going on in and saying, no, 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 this is how you will buy. This is how you will sell. This is what it's going to cost. We're in charge now. We're in charge of your economy. And by golly, looking at the global economy, aren't they doing just a bang-up job? They really are. So the U.S. is going to impose tariffs on $7.5 billion in EU imports starting October 18th, and is talking about cutting capital flows to China. Now, we've been talking about the retail apocalypse. We've been talking about the fact that cars are not selling. People just don't have the money. They do not have the money. So the latest thing that's coming on out there is they're stretching auto loans to 8 years. They'll give you 8 years plus accruing interest to be able to buy your new car. There's only one problem with that. The cars aren't built to last that long. The higher end cars, yes, they'll last 8 years. The business model there is the original owner keeps them from 5 years, then they sell them to the aftermarket, used car market for the additional 3. By that time, the car is falling apart. You know, they actually control the galvanization on the steel parts of the car so that they start rusting through at a certain point. It's planned obsolescence. So now they're going to have auto loans that last longer than the car itself does. That is just sick. Claire and I are so lucky that we were able to get our current car for basically cash on the barrel head. We don't owe anything on it, although I got to take it in and get Indiana plates and an Indiana driver's license and all the rest of that stuff. But we own that car. Now, you've probably seen some TV commercials lately on how some of these day trading companies, small scale investing companies, are dropping commissions on trades. Like Schwab and TD Ameritrade. E-Trade has now just done the same thing. They're trying to get people to come on in there and work on the trade. Without the commissions, I don't know what their revenue model is, unless they're riding the straddles. Remember Red Bone and Hillary's magic 100,000 profit on cattle futures? Amazing here. Anyway, the United States gross national debt has jumped by $1.2 trillion with a T in fiscal 2019 to a grand total of $22.7 trillion. That's 106.5% of the gross domestic product. Now, we're certainly not in the worst financial condition of countries, but we're not in good condition here. $22 trillion. Somebody somewhere is expecting to, collect taxes to make good on all of that. I've been talking for a while about this folly of robots and automation, of taking jobs away from living humans, which means living humans aren't making paychecks and cannot go into the stores and buy things. But apparently there's been another aspect to the robots that is just now being realized. Basically, a study has found the national income has dropped to 56% of what it used to be because workers are afraid of asking for a raise out of fear that they'll be replaced by a robot. So the American people are getting less and less money. Bills are going up, taxes are going up. You don't need to be a genius to figure out there's going to be a crossover point where it's all going to start coming apart. It has to start coming apart. They can't keep going like this. A healthy consumer economy depends on people being able to trade their skills and labor for decent wages and salaries so they can buy cars without 8-year auto loans, so that they can buy a home, so that they can buy the latest big screen TV, so that they can buy replacement appliances for their home. And it's just not happening. And you look in the newspaper ads here, and you see all these stores are out there. We're selling stuff off for 50% off. I saw that in the local newspaper here lately. You know, an appliance store. You know, we're letting everything go at half price right now. Nobody has the money to make this economy work. And the more you automate, the more you use robots, the worse it's going to get. And I don't understand why nobody in Washington, D.C. understands what's going on. Or maybe they just don't care. As long as the corporate profits are going up and they're getting their donations from the CEOs, they're going to be fine. And if America's out of work, who knows? Or maybe, another hypothesis here, that they're planning on revitalizing our manufacturing with a war. Because that's what happened in World War II. We went into the Depression in the 1930s. It was just a horrible, horrible time. Then all of a sudden, we're at war with everybody. And yes, we're hiring people to build Liberty ships and battleships and submarines and aircraft stuff. And even the women were put to work loading the ammunition. Maybe that's the plan here. Get everybody so poor that they'll be willing to work in the war industries just to pay their rent. Okay, so, alrighty, down in Florida, they passed this law earlier this year to ban so-called sanctuary cities, and it took effect this Tuesday. The measure was passed by the Florida legislature back in May, was signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis, who campaigned on the immigration issue the following month. The law bars Florida cities from having sanctuary policies or those that restrict a law enforcement agency's ability to work with federal immigration authorities. Good for the people in Florida. At least it's a start. And Florida is one of the states that has been most negatively impacted by this influx of illegal immigrants and illegal refugees. Alrighty, up in San Francisco, as you know, not too long ago, the San Francisco's Board of Supervisors passed a resolution declaring the National Rifle Association a domestic terrorist organization and ordered city employees to take every reasonable step to limit business interactions with the NRA and everybody who supported them. One that David French labeled a retaliatory public attack on constitutionally protected speech. Well, the NRA has sued, and the Board of Supervisors backed down without even going to court. Because, again, just on First and Second Amendment grounds, they would have lost that case. Speaking of the NRA, Schumer and Wyden are now requesting an IRS audit of the NRA to see if it qualifies for its tax-exempt status. And a recent report by Wyden's committee raised questions about some NRA activities and social welfare requirements for its tax exemption. So the report alleged some NRA members used a 2015 NRA trip to Moscow for their own personal business reasons rather than for tax-exempt purposes. And that would have violated the tax laws. So while you're at it, how about checking out that Clinton Foundation, which hasn't donated enough to charity to qualify as a 501c3? Okay. Over in Ohio, there's been another active shooter training drill at an Ohio high school where the cops dressed up as guest terrorists or something, ran onto the campus firing shotguns and rifle blanks to have realistic sound effects to teach the kids what to do, how to hide in their classrooms, how to blockade the doors, and so forth. I got a better idea. Teach the students how to shoot. You think anybody is going to go onto a school campus knowing that the students there know how to shoot back? It's when you create these disarmed areas, these gun-free zones, that the nutcases with their brains melted on prescription psychological drugs say, I can go in and I can have fun over there. Teach the students how to shoot. When I went to school, you were taught how to shoot. They had gun classes, they had gun safety class, they had gun clubs. The government was donating surplus World War II and Korean rifles to the schools. The government wasn't afraid of us back then. Anyway, now a lot of people have been expressing a degree of concern over the fact that social media has become this total censorship. And is it just because of their political bias? Maybe, maybe not. But apparently somebody has uncovered indications that Reddit doesn't make more money by having more users, that Reddit is actually getting paid to censor discussion. And that would not surprise me at all. We had that story the other day about how Facebook has gone, Google has gone total nuclear on pharmaceutical posts. If it isn't supporting big pharma, it gets deleted. If it talks about alternative medications and homeopathic, it gets gone. Of course they're getting paid for this. Just like corporate media is paid advertising money to push vaccines and various other things that social media is now raking in the dough doing that. And so we need to basically come up with a way to rebuild a social media network without censorship. And that means all of us working together on it, no central corporate entity, but everybody hosting little peer-to-peer devices that send messages back and forth. I remember the days of FidoNet, where everything was just packeted from modem to modem to modem to modem. There was no central command authority. The original ARPANET was designed to not have a central command authority that could be used to censor and control the discussions. That was the original idea. And then when the American government started getting very nervous that the American people were starting to talk with each other, that's when all these giant social media companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter and everything started popping up with huge amounts of financing. And now here they are basically acting as the gatekeepers to make sure that the only thing that you will see on your computer is the same stuff that you're seeing on your corporate TV feed or your newspaper. And it's getting intense out there. Biden is demanding all TV networks to stop hosting Rudy Giuliani because Giuliani is basically ratting out Biden's crimes over there in Ukraine. Well, we can't have that. Actually report the news of political corruption in Ukraine. We can't have that. This is America. And now Kamala Harris is demanding that Twitter suspend President Trump's Twitter account. Now that one's going to be a bit of a trick because there's already been a court case that declared Trump's Twitter account a public space, not subject to censorship or blocking. But I mean, that's where it's going. These people are out there trying to say, you will only see what we want you to see. You will only read what we want you to read. You will have no other access to any other information, which again, as I said earlier in the program, is why it is so important to support Republic Broadcasting Network. Now, there's an interesting little article, this came from Reason.com, saying all speech should be free, and it goes on in basically saying, why are we seeing all of this censorship on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And it says it's because the government wants to reassert control over everything that we see, read, and hear. And they've been doing it all along, propaganda. I remember seeing it when I was in grade school. But we didn't know about it back then. We didn't realize the extent we were being lied to. And now we do. And the government doesn't like that. The government doesn't like the American people realizing that corporate media and the government are fibbing to us. They're prevaricating. They're lying. They're tricking us. They're deceiving us left and right. They don't like that one tiny bit. Apparently over at Microsoft, in between screwing up Windows 10, their artificial intelligence people have created a bot that can generate fake comments for news articles. So now not only are the news articles themselves being filtered, but the comments are being generated by computers. Oh yes, this is a great news article. Trump should be impeached. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And once again, please support RBN. Please send in a donation. Otherwise, we're going to have to sell John Stadmiller for medical experiments. Claire just said, Dave, we'll sell Dave for medical experiments. All righty. All right, send in a donation or I'm going to make a really ugly face at this squirrel who's just outside the window. Getting on back to more serious news here. Apparently, Google is in hot water. They're facing a mass action over claims it accessed 4 million iPhone users' data. And again, Siri turned on and was echoing the story I was putting on out here. 4 million iPhone users' data. And of course, they make money off that data. Your personal data, which is your property in theory, they're making money off of it. And their idea is, well, look, we've sold you this wonderful electronic device here, and we got to make a little money off of this whole thing. Actually, they make a lot of money off of this stuff. I was talking with Dave earlier today about one of the biggest botch-ups in software development, and it had to do with a very early, in fact, the very first computer spreadsheet called VisiCalc. And the people who developed it didn't have the money to file a patent. So the guy who owns Oracle patented a computer-based spreadsheet, and he now owns the island of Lanai out in Hawaii. A lot of theft out there. We were talking about a show, Halt and Catch Fire. If you haven't seen that, gotta hunt it down. Dave and I, we lived through all of that. And it's very accurate about the early days of the computer revolution. So anyway, Google is out there. They've accessed 4 million iPhone users' data, and that's a lot of money. And it's your data. And I don't know about you, at my age, I'm not really shy, but I am a private person. And I don't want Google to know that I went over to the bakery and got a jelly donut on the way home from work, even though this is my work here. Now, here's a very interesting story, and this is from CNN. Apparently, the FBI is running Facebook ads targeting Russians in Washington, D.C. And apparently, the ads are designed to recruit Russian spies as well as those who know about their work. This is coming from CNN. Now, one ad said by CNN features a stock photo of a young woman at her graduation with her family, and the Russian text overlaid on the image reads, "For your future, for the future of your family." Another shows a picture of a chess set with a Russian text that translates to, "Isn't it time for you to make your move?" And the first thing that occurred to me when I read this story is what a wonderful opportunity for the Russians to plant spies inside the FBI. Hi there, I'm here in response to your ad on Facebook. I want to be a spy for you. I don't know who thought that up, but I mean, it's an open invitation to be infiltrated. What is wrong with these people? Okay. Over at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is part of the United Nations, and they have issued a lot of papers over the years, most of which have been exaggerated, cooked, misleading, and they just had to retract a new one. They had this paper saying the oceans are warming faster than we thought, and they've now officially retracted it. And so it's another embarrassment here. And they're out there still talking about this Greta Thunberg. Oh, I mean, she's the savior. She's the savior of the planet because she's out there saying that we have to do all these things here. Have you seen how much media attention this girl gets? I mean, even Vladimir Putin was basically shaming her and saying, yeah, she looks good on camera. She should. She's a professional actress and everything, but you shouldn't allow emotions to override the science. And he's absolutely right about that. So apparently a group of scientists have gotten together and said there is no climate emergency. And the scientists are saying it's time for a reasoned debate based on the facts and not just all of this constant harangue of the sky is falling, the polar bears are drowning, they're going extinct. And by the way, they're not. The polar bears have come back to the point where you're being allowed to hunt polar bears again. So first chance I get, polar bear rug in the middle of the living room. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you, Michael. Yeah, Michael, the other day, I couldn't call you yesterday, but the other day, this guy called in about the rapes, Swedish women getting raped by the thousands.
Yes.
Michael, and then I told you about that thing they found a statue. Wasn't that the land of the Vikings? What happened to the men in Sweden? Are they a bunch of chicken livers, or what's happened to they're supposed to have Viking blood and they're allowing their women to come and get raped by Muslims, like something out of medieval times? Well,
I imagine that the Muslims are raping the women when the men aren't around to defend them. And under Swedish law, you can't just go out and kill a random Muslim because you think that they committed a rape. We are still trying to be a civilized society.
Well, Michael, I got to tell you, in that regard, okay? You know what? If my government were to allow that here in this country, there would be no government. I would say there is no Swedish government. They're allowing the Viking bloodline of that country to be raped by a foreign invasion. That's disgraceful and disgusting and absolutely deplorable. I don't even know how to say it, so I'm upset about hearing about that because, I mean, these people are supposed to be the Vikings of the Nordics, the Norse, and they're going to allow their women to get raped by these, what do you call it? The midi? What do you call it? I can't even think. I'm so upset about this, hearing about that, and I actually read up about it. It's disgusting.
Well, back in the days of the Vikings, rape was kind of acceptable. In fact, believe it or not, when the Vikings were trading with the Arab nations, they openly engaged in prostitution. You could pay a Viking so many coins and you could have sex with his wife. And that was just that was the normal thing here. Now, as far as Sweden today, they're a very liberal government. In fact, Claire and I are big fans of the Amazon Prime TV show, The Grand Tour, and they said some very unflattering things about the Swedish liberal government, which is why they've not been invited back to Sweden since then. But yeah, it's everywhere you look where liberalism has taken hold, it's a disaster, whether it's New York or Sweden or London. It's like liberalism has lost its common sense. And they're caught up in all these fantasies of this liberal utopia of transgenderism and unisex bathrooms and how it's all going to make us all much happier people, which so far hasn't worked. And that's because it's all based on a flawed psychological theory that came out of Margaret Mead's book, Coming of Age in Samoa, which turned out to be an intellectual fraud. And yet on that fraud rests the entire philosophical foundation of modern liberalism.
Well, you know what, Michael, that's all wonderful. But, Michael, you know, if my daughter or anybody, if you had a daughter, Michael, and somebody raped your daughter, you know what? I don't care. I'd go against an army. Okay? This crap that we're hearing about women in Sweden getting raped by the thousands and their government's not doing that and they're slapping these Muslims on the hand. Are you kidding me? If somebody touches my daughter, Michael, I'll take a million men out. Okay? That's how I feel.
I agree with you. I agree with you. If somebody were to assault Claire and I knew for a fact who it was, I would probably take that Conan sword and julienne them.
And you know what, Michael? I'd be right next to you helping you do it.
Good.
I'd be right there next to your side helping you do whatever you had to. Because when it comes to that kind of, most of these are young women, I suppose, 16, 18, 20 years old. I mean, they're not doing, I don't think, too many older Swedish women.
I mean, don't know the statistics on that.
Have fathers and mothers. So if anybody was to rape a young woman and there's a mother and father involved and they sit back and they allow their liberal government to get away with it, that government should be terminated right off the spot. If that's the case, and we're hearing this kind of numbers, there should be a total revolution in Sweden with taking the government out. That's all I feel about this when I hear that. If it's true about thousands of Swedish women getting raped.
Well, unfortunately, the Swedish people have been successfully brainwashed into thinking that liberalism is the wave of the future and globalism is coming and New World Order. They really have drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And I'm in agreement with you. I mean, this open border situation, not just in Sweden, it's been a disaster everywhere it's been tried because these groups of people are coming in. They are not assimilating. They are not learning to comply with the local laws. They come on in thinking that they can behave in the new country exactly the same way they behaved in the old country, which was not very polite, I might add.
You're absolutely right, Michael. By the way, I'll let your listeners and you hit in on this. You know, Molly Tibbetts' case is coming up, the one that was murdered in Iowa, in the cornfield, yes. And they died, raped her, stabbed her. Well, her case was on one American News that says the only one that's talking about her trial coming up. The guy's going on trial. He's claiming now that he don't speak English and all that. He wants to go back to Mexico, and you have all these Mexicans coming up here to Iowa. I guess this case is going, and they're trying to keep it quiet because I don't know how the media is going to react when this really comes out. It'll be basically the same thing as the Kate Steinle case, where you saw what happened with Kate Steinle. The guy takes a gun, he shoots someone, kills her, and she dies in the dad's arms. And this guy's back in. I don't even know if they shipped him back to Mexico yet. But this Molly Tibbetts case is coming up. That should be talked about every day on every major network. Okay.
Yep.
Like you were mentioning, California's got homeless everywhere. And Michael, one thing I want you really to talk to on your next couple of callers, if they would. I want to know, I've been hearing this crap about the sanctuary cities and the homelessness in California.
Yes.
But what they're not talking about is all these illegals are in the state taking up where these people should be living at. So what is going on with the housing in California as far as the housing goes? If these people are all living on the street in tents, where do these illegal 7 million illegals live? Where are these 11 million illegals actually living at?
They're being given subsidized housing. They're being given subsidized housing. That's why when Donald Trump criticized the state of California over its homeless problem, California came on back and said, well, we need so many millions of dollars to house the homeless here because we spent $23 billion taking care of the illegal immigrants. You know, and it basically shows a tremendous lack of priorities among liberalism because, you know, I'm a paleoconservative myself. And to me, you take care of your own people first. And once they're all taken care of and they're comfortable and they all have jobs and they all have a good quality of life, if you have something left over and a sense of charity, then you can help them. But it's been completely reversed in places like California and New York, where it's like, oh, we've got to take care of these poor immigrants and refugees first. And well, we'll let the ordinary people, they'll figure something out. They'll take care of themselves.
Exactly. Don't forget New Jersey, Mike. Yeah, but you know what, Michael? Another thing is with this this immigration situation and these mass shootings in these big cities and Democrat-controlled cities, the American people should have said, Michael, what would happen if white Americans said all of a sudden we don't want to pay taxes no more? Say 100% of all white Anglos say we're not going to pay no more federal withholding tax. What would happen in the United States?
Well, they'd collapse pretty fast because of that $22 trillion debt here. There's a video out on YouTube, at least I think it's still out on YouTube, called The Tiny Dot. And that is one that everybody listening to this show should first of all look at and then email to everybody that they know.
What is it called? What's it called? Tiny Dot?
The Tiny Dot. In fact, on this next commercial break, I'll make sure that it goes up on whatreallyhappened.com.
I'll check it out. I'm going to check it out and see if I am done. Tiny Dot. Yeah, Michael, and also, you know, again, talking about these cities that the Democrats control, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, every weekend you have, I'm telling you, must be at least 20 murders. I don't know how many shootings throughout New York, L.A., Chicago. I mean, does this have, if Trump were to come out and say that there's curfews in these cities, they would call him a racist pig, he's a anti- black, he's a Nazi. I mean, can you imagine the filth that Trump would be having to endure because he's trying to save people's lives, trying to stop the crime? This is nothing but, I don't know what to say. And talking about Sweden, the government of Sweden is allowing their women to get raped and bringing mosques all over the place now over there, which was the land of the Vikings. I just don't understand. Oh, by the way, Michael, did you hear the story about Paris, France?
Tell it to me.
Six police officers were stabbed to death inside of a precinct. I think I just saw on Breitbart.
Yeah, 4 of them got killed, and the assailant used a ceramic knife.
Yes, I don't know. Did they say who did it?
They haven't. I haven't looked that far into the story, but apparently somebody just walked into this police station with a ceramic knife, which means they got past the metal detectors and they just started stabbing police officers. And you know, it's funny. I have a family member who's a former law enforcement, and we were over at the local Walmart, and he was looking at housewares at the ceramic knives. Now, ceramic knives are really good. They hold very sharp edges. They're very good to cook with. And the first thing he said is, you can walk past a metal detector with this. And, of course, my response to that would be, make sure there's a metal bar in the handle. But apparently that was not the case here with this ceramic knife that was used in France.
He must have to kill 4 police officers like that. That must be been a horrific carnage there. I mean, that's unbelievable. And
yes.
But there you go. And you know, they want to take all the guns away in this country, but they sure make sure Israel's got everyone's got a gun over there. It's an Israeli citizen. Oh, go up there! You're 16 years old. Go get an Uzi. I mean, what double standard?
It's not just Israel. I mean, look at all the guns the U.S. is sending down to the Mexican drug cartels in Fast and Furious. Look at all the guns that we're sending over to Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and Syria. Everybody in the world is getting guns from the United States of America except the American people.
Well, they want to take our guns away from us, Michael, and they want to look at all the gangs.
They're afraid of us.
Exactly. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I did see Trump was in Florida today. I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but he was in the Village, and he was talking about health care. That's another scam that the Democrats are trying to run with this medical. I mean, we're paying more in taxes. We are. What did it say? Some people are paying more in taxes now than they are actually making in money. I mean, can you imagine if Hillary was in there? If Hillary was in there, Michael, none of this would have been kept quiet, though. The media, you know, I look at Nixon. I was looking at Nixon, and I was realizing how powerful Walter Cronkite was back in 1972.
Oh, yes.
The media. If Donald Trump would have had a Sean Hannity, Nixon, excuse me, if Richard Nixon would have had a Sean Hannity or Laura, or like anybody could have defended him, the media back then, he might have been able to hold on for a while. But the media, the liberal media, is just attacking Nixon full brunt, and he had no recourse with cable news or anything to repulse it. So what the media, the media is so corrupted. There is no media anymore. These are all pundit talking heads for the Communist Party of the Bolsheviks, run by George Soros.
It's the Ministry of Truth.
Exactly, Michael. So anyway, thank you for taking my call. And I'm looking at the immigration figures, Michael. By the way, and right now, 995,000 illegals since this year. $2.7 billion it cost American taxpayers this year. $2.7 billion, and the total legal immigration is in the United States is almost 27 million.
Yep. It's an ugly situation. And again, the part that I think is infuriating, certainly to me, and probably to most Americans, is that these illegal immigrants are getting better treatment from the U.S. government than the American taxpayer is. And it just doesn't make any sense. Again, getting back to the idea that the economic predations are getting us all ready to be willing to work in the war factories and everything, if they really think they're going to fight World War III with an army of illegal alien conscripts, they have no emotional connection to this country. They're not going to risk their lives defending the American flag. The first time they go into battle, they're going to drop everything.
You're saying it's so powerful.
Yeah, they're going to run like heck. They already.
So powerful and true.
They already tried it once. They set up an experimental unit of illegal immigrants who were going to go through basic training and learn how to fight in exchange for an eventual green card, and it was a complete and utter failure.
Well, Michael, that should be on the news every day. That's something what you're bringing out to listeners that should be talked about every day. They don't care about the founding of this country. They only are coming here for the jobs and the money. And one more thing, Michael, I'll let you go.
Yeah.
The money that they're sending back to these countries, that should be taxed 25 to 35%, and all this nonsense would stop. They're sending so many billions of dollars back to those countries that never come back to this country. It's appalling.
We should not let that money leave this country. There should be rules at the bank saying that, these people are not allowed to send these funds back to their home country because it's bleeding this country economically at a time when we cannot afford it. $22 trillion in debt, and the illegal immigrants are just siphoning off more money and sending it back to their home country. I'm sorry. I know things are hard in their country where they came from, but the proper thing to do is to stay there and try and fix it. We've got problems in this country. Do you see Americans sneaking across the border into Canada or Mexico and say, please give us free stuff here because life sucks in the United States of America? No, we're sitting here, we're running the independent media, we're trying to fix the problems with this country, and all of these illegal immigrants should be doing the same. They should be back in their home country saying, let's get together and figure out a way to make this work. Instead, they're being lured here. They're being lured here with promises of free stuff.
Yes, Michael, right. And, Ronald Reagan in 1988, he was told that these illegals are sending billions of dollars back to those countries, and he was going to have a bill. And that's why I'm a little skeptical of Ronald Reagan, because Reagan could have stopped a lot of this nonsense with the money being sent back. So
Trump could do it right now. Trump could do it with an executive order. No banks are allowed to send foreign transfers unless the person sending the money proves that they're a legal citizen.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct, Michael. So anyway, you have a great show, and I don't know what else to say. It's appalling, all this stuff that's going on, but we'll see what happens with this, the hoax, the witch hunt against impeachment. That's another disgrace.
I don't see this country surviving much longer. It's coming apart that fast. It's descending into chaos. Anyway, listen, Tom, I got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before the phone calls, we were talking about the climate crisis and the new heroine of the climate movement, which is this young lady who's out there getting a lot of coverage there. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. But scientists are saying it's time for a reasoned debate. What we have here right now is people on one side of the argument are dismissing their opponents as wild-eyed socialists attempting to leverage public fear and ignorance to further their political agenda, which is true. And on the opposite side, people dismiss those who disagree with their supposedly settled scientific conclusions by screaming that they're obviously being paid by the evil energy companies. So we're going to have ourselves a nice reasoned debate as soon as we dig out from all of this snow. Which brings me to this next story. As you know, over in the Pacific Northwest, they have been having record-setting snow, all-time record-setting snow. And basically, it's just coming on down. And here's where it gets a little bit interesting. There was this couple, and newlyweds Sean and Brittany Towie planned for it to be sunny and 75 on the wedding day. That was the weather forecast. And they got a blizzard instead. And they got through the wedding and everything, but all the bridesmaids are in their summer dresses, being snowed on and shivering. And it basically betrays the fact that weather forecasting seems to have declined. And it was rather interesting because earlier today, I was looking at our very expensive automated electronic weather forecasting machine, which is never right. And unfortunately, it's currently predicting thunderstorms for Sunday, which is the day we're moving the furniture into our new place. So I hope that their usual record of inaccuracy continues. But there was this guy here at this resort who was saying that there used to be this lady on TV. She was the TV weather girl, and she made a big deal about how she used the old-fashioned methods tell what the weather was going to be, and that she was right 90% of the time. And it sort of rang a bell with me because I rely on the old Farmer's Almanac, not the new copy just like one, but the original old Farmer's Almanac, because they too used the original traditional ways of telling the weather, and they've got a very, very good accuracy rate. These days, you look on these little devices, I can't tell you the number of times it said there's going to be thunderstorms, bright, shiny, clear day. And like I said, I hope they're wrong for Sunday, because that's going to be a problem. Anyway, so this woman is out there and she's getting all this coverage. More about her when she comes back. We'll be right back with hour number 3, I promise. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Not going to make that mistake again here. So everyone's talking about this Swedish environmentalist Greta Thunberg, who also happens to be a paid professional actress. She's got her own page over at the Internet Movie Database. And have you seen how much news coverage she's getting? I mean, she's all over the place. Oh, the planet is coming to an end. We've got to do something. Please believe me, I'm a young child. I wouldn't lie to you about all of this stuff. Of course you would. She's paid to do that. Have you noticed how little news coverage all of Jeffrey Epstein's victims are getting? They get barely a mention, and usually in ways to say, they deserved it. They were willing participants. They agreed to whore themselves out to all of these people, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, here's where the story starts to get a little more interesting, as if it wasn't interesting enough. A former high-ranking official in Israeli military intelligence is admitting Jeffrey Epstein's sexual blackmail enterprise was an Israeli intelligence operation run for the purpose of entrapping powerful individuals and politicians in the United States. So Jeff Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell worked for Israeli intelligence. The thing that I could never figure out is, You're invited over to this house. It's filled with underage girls who are offering you intimate massages. Isn't there some part of that brain that says, you know, this feels like a honey trap, and I think I want to get out of here? But apparently it worked. And so now we've got a confirmation this was a spy operation. Everybody was always saying, where is he getting all of his money? His investment company wasn't investing. You know, he had that huge house in Manhattan. He had the one down there in Florida. He had the island he built down in the Caribbean after his Florida arrest. There was that ridiculous wrist slap sentence for Florida. Yes, he was owned by intelligence. And the next question is, how many of our politicians, and we know Bill Clinton's one of them, were trapped in this honey trap? And I think what we need to do is we need to find all those files. I'm sure that they're out there somewhere. Somebody's got them. They're still using them. But we need to identify everybody who fell into that trap, and we need to out them. We need to say, this person had sex with an underage girl. This person had sex with an underage girl for the purposes of Israeli blackmail. Get it all out there, because then it's no longer effective. Israel can't come to somebody and say, you better do what we say or we're going to tell the world you were having sex with an underage girl. And the guy says, they already know. Big deal. They already know. There's nothing you can do about it. Anyway, so, yeah, that explains Jeff Epstein. And by the way, I think he's still alive. I don't think he died. I think his death was faked. And he's either in Israel or he's down in the Caymans playing canasta with Ken Lay. All right, let's take a phone call here from Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I have to disagree with Tom about Sweden. And I notice the alt-right, they always point fingers at Sweden and Germany. And look at your own country. Look at the U.S.
Yes.
He was saying how Muslims are raping women in Sweden. You know,
well, here in this country, it's more the Mexicans.
Exactly. For 50 years, we've had mainly, quote, Christian minorities, blacks and minorities, who've been, you know, raping women for 50 years. So, you know, people, and I noticed that on the alt-right, they're always saying, pointing fingers at Sweden and Germany. Fix your own country. We've been having rapes like crazy for 50 years. And it wasn't by Muslims.
Look at what happens in the aftermath of war. Look what happened when Germany lost World War II. I mean, the Allies went on a rape fest against the German women. Yeah. Look at all the Muslim women who were raped during the Crusades. Yeah. It's sort of kind of, I guess it's a perk of the trade.
But the alt-right, it seems they've substituted the word Muslim for, I hate to say, minorities and non-whites.
Well, Muslims are being targeted. Muslims are the new scapegoat group. I mean, for Nazi Germany, it was the Jews. For the United States, it's the Muslims.
Yeah. And Tom, inadvertently, is playing into the war agenda. The alt-right, they substitute the word Muslim because that promotes endless war in the Middle East. You have to demonize the Muslims. Yeah, I'd like to see a study.
We're going to war in the Middle East. I mean, that's what that whole move of the Command and Control Center from Qatar to South Carolina is about. We're getting ready to attack Iran. And Muqtada al-Sadr, where was he again? Yeah, Muqtada al-Sadr is in Iran. And so everybody's lining up and they're getting ready to they're getting ready to uncork. All they're looking for is for something that will convince the American people that a war with Iran is moral and just and absolutely necessary and worth the life and limb of their children, not to mention all their money.
Well, I think they need a pretty bad false flag to
Yes.
Pearl Harbor type effect. But I'd like to see a study on which religion statistically commits more crimes. I would bet that Christians commit more, because in Muslim countries, they'll execute you, cut off your hand for stealing. So I'd like to see a statistic. As these Alex Jones people, they obsess over Muslims.
Yeah, I've noticed that about him. I think statistics like that are going to be hard to come by, but we do know that Christianity is a very bloody religion. We know about the Crusades. We know about the witch hunts. They were certainly very rude to my ancestors back in the 1490s. And there was this story that came out the other day about this massacre in the Philippines that was out there. Did you ever hear about the Battle of Sand Creek? It was part of the American West lore, where these soldiers rode into this Indian camp that the men were all gone. All that was left there were old men, women, and children, and they slaughtered everybody, cut off parts of their bodies and everything. The guy who led that raid was a Methodist minister.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Quote, Christians, the atrocities committed by them through centuries has been astounding. Another point, what of the shootings in Chicago? They're almost 90%, quote, Christians shooting other mainly black Christians. So,
well, I think in that case, that's tied in with the drug wars. I mean, you're looking at cities where, huge amounts of drug trafficking, and they're fighting over turf, and that's where a lot of this bloodshed is coming from.
But they were brought up as Christian. That's my point. Whether they follow it or not, I doubt. But they were brought up. Well, I was
brought up Christian. It didn't stick.
Oh, one more thing. The alt-right, they're obsessing over Greta.
Yes.
You know what? Don't take the bait. I think this is all like a created divide and conquer type of thing. It's like a created controversy.
I think the global warming people are hoping it's going to be a mild, warm winter so they can go back to screaming about global warming. But so far, to judge from what's going on out in the Pacific Northwest and Tahoe and those whole areas, it's going to be another early, hard, long winter. That's my prediction. I'll put a whole nickel on that one.
Yes. Yeah. But I think they're putting too much focus on this Greta girl. She's an actress playing a part.
Yeah, that's exactly what she's doing, and they're putting the focus on her. They don't want to talk about what the Bidens were doing in Ukraine. They don't want to talk about all these girls who were caught up in Jeff Epstein thing. I mean, they're basically, they're putting forward all of these little created stories to try and hold our attention, so we're not thinking about the things that we're not supposed to be thinking about. The double plus ungood news we're not supposed to pay attention to.
That's exactly right. That's what they're doing. They're creating these stories, and they're getting in the alt-right or the right. They fall for it. I would just ignore it and go brush it off. She's an actress, and just forget about it.
I don't know that they're falling for it. I mean, Putin was making jokes about her, and I don't think she's getting a lot of traction. And I think we've reached a point where, despite all of this intense censorship going on in social media, I think we're already past the watershed moment where the American people have simply lost all confidence in government and corporate media. and now social media. We're talking amongst ourselves, and that's what we should be doing. Talk to each other and say, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, that is one bright spot is people are waking up.
Yes.
Is it fast enough to prevent a disaster? I don't know. But people are waking up, and they're not believing the mainstream media. And that's some good news. And let's hope more people stop believing what's on television.
Oh, I don't watch television anymore. I mean, I'll have Fox News on there to read the closed captioning, but frankly, if it wasn't for those plunging necklines, I'd just turn it off.
Yeah. Well, I call Fox the Gorgeous Women Reading War Propaganda Network.
That's a good name for them. And, for all the talk about diversity, have you ever seen the complete lineup of all the Fox newscasters? They're all white. They're all white.
They're all beautiful blondes, too.
Yeah, beautiful blondes.
Mostly beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
here's your diversity for you,
Mike. Thank you for taking my call. Have a good show. Bye.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. I really will. Now, before we took the call here from Jim, we were talking about the confirmation, apparently from a former Israeli intelligence official, that Jeff Epstein's little pedophile operation was in fact a honey trap to lure in and compromise American politicians for the benefit of Israel. And I'm looking at this story here. This is actually a video. And it's from governmentslaves.news. It's from Steve Pachenik, who's basically saying that Adam Schiff was caught in a pedophile trafficking ring. So what a bunch of sleazeballs there. And this explains why they always do what they're told by Israel. Israel's got them all by the short and curlies. And that's why the very best thing that could happen is for whoever has all those files on all those people being blackmailed, if they were to just leak them out to the media right now and just make it all public. These are the ones who did it. It's already out there. It's done. They can't be blackmailed anymore because we already know what they did. So anyway, all right, let's talk about some health news here. There is a new flu vaccine out. And as was the case with last year, it's for the wrong strain of flu. They blew it again this year. This one is a little bit alarming because pharmaceutical giant Novartis has ruled out its new flu vaccine, which contains a new adjuvant called squalene. Now, squalene is the substance many say is responsible for triggering Gulf War syndrome. Remember when Gulf War syndrome first came on out, the Pentagon said, oh, they're just imagining it. It's in their heads. They're trying to get a Section 8 out, and it's not there. But right now, over 250,000 of the 697,000 U.S. veterans who served in the Persian Gulf are afflicted with the condition. And now they're putting the chemical they think caused the condition in the now mandatory flu vaccine. These pharmaceutical companies, they want you to be sick because then they can make money treating your symptoms. They're not going to cure you. Even Goldman Sachs has said, curing sick people, that's a bad business model. It's an absolute bad business model. You want to keep them sick, keep them under treatment here. Okay. Apparently, there's been a bit of a snafu over at an Army base in Mississippi late last night. Nearly 24 soldiers suffered major injuries when they were practicing a night jump from a C-130 at Camp Shelby. But apparently, the pilot wasn't paying attention to the crosswinds, and the paratroopers blew away from the intended drop zone and into a forested area. And landing in a tree, even in a parachute, can break things. So that definitely pilot error. Just didn't know which way the wind was going. All righty, here is kind of an interesting story. over in London, they're getting ready to do a stage version of The Color Purple, which was this very popular Steven Spielberg movie. And they're doing it as a stage production. And apparently the actress, top actress, Seyi Ornuba's traditional Christian views on homosexuality cost her the lead role in the stage production. And now she is suing. And I think she should. Okay? Where the liberals have really gone wrong is they believe that you can legislate feelings, that you can legislate morality, and you can't. You can legislate behavior, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, but you can't pass a law that says you will love purple squirrels. It's just not going to work. And people have a right to their opinions. Okay? Now, her Christian faith says there's an issue with homosexuality. Personally, I don't have a problem with homosexuality. Okay, but you know something? That's my choice to make. It's not your choice to tell me how I'm going to view homosexuality or transgender or all the rest of it. Those are my personal choices to make, and nobody gets to make that up for me, not even liberals. So I hope she sues, and I hope she wins. Because she was hired to be an actress, not a spokesperson. And I'm getting sick and tired of people whose careers and lives are being destroyed because they will not toe the liberal dogma. Sig heil, sig heil, sig heil, sig heil, sig heil. Yesterday, we reported on this story where apparently there was a raid on the Vatican Secretary of State offices, and we were looking for more and more information with it. And apparently, this is now linked to mafia infiltration and money laundering. So it looks like the Vatican Bank didn't really learn anything from Roberto Calvi dangling underneath the London Bridge all those years ago. So they're still out there. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as I have made clear on many occasions, I'm a fan of children. I'm a fan of letting children be children as long as they can. I find this idea of sexual abuse of children aberrant in the extreme. And as you probably already aware, it's a big problem in various religious institutions, especially the Catholics. And over the years, a number of Vatican officials have been implicated in sexually abusing children. Now, the first thing that occurs to me is this obviously means they don't believe there's a hell, because they're doing all of this stuff. They're not afraid that they're going to get sent down with the pitchforks and the flaming lava and the devils and the rest of it. They're just going to do what they're going to do and go on with the collection plates. But there have been some major scandals. You've got Cardinal George Pell. He was just convicted on 5 counts of child sexual abuse. He is now the most senior official ever to be found guilty, serving as an advisor to Pope Benedict as well as Pope Francis. He's one of the Vatican's most powerful officials, or at least he was. There was another huge scandal involving a choir led by the retired Pope Benedict's brother, and approximately 600 members, that's 600 members of this Catholic boys' Domspatzen choir in Regensburg, Germany, were physically and sexually abused from 1945 to 1992. George Ratzinger, Benedict's brother, was the choir's head from 64 to 1994. In 2015, a lawyer by the name of Ulrich Weber was tasked with filing a report on what happened and found that basically the 600 boys' accusations were credible. They were victims of sexual and physical abuse. The list literally goes on and on. Not too long ago, 34 Chilean bishops from the Catholic Church were implicated in the sexual abuse of young boys. And there was this documentary that came on out a while back called Max Mea Culpa, Silence in the House of God. And it was about this Catholic organization for people who couldn't speak. They had to use sign language. And they were being abused. And when they were going home, they were trying to explain to their family what was going on, but the families didn't understand the sign language. Okay? So we keep hearing from the Pope, oh, it's a terrible thing, something has to be done. But nothing is being done. And according to Carlo Maria Vigano, who's the titular Archbishop of Ulpiana Apostolic Nuncio, he retired in 2016 after serving as the Apostolic Nuncio to the United States. He's out there saying, the Pope, this goes all the way up to the Pope himself. Remember the TV series South Park? They had an episode called Red Hot Catholic Love that dealt with this issue, and of course it was immediately condemned by the Catholic Church. How dare you? It's heresy. How dare you say? But it seems to happen. And if you really think about it, somebody who is sexually attracted to young boys, going into the church makes a lot of sense because you've got instant respectability with that robe. Nobody's going to think you're doing anything sinful or bad. You're supposed to be the representative of the ultimate moral authority on earth. And yet these things really happen. In Claire's previous church, I'm not going to name names, don't worry, but there was an incident where one of the staff there was caught diddling the kids. And I mean, how can you look at an organization that claims to represent a supreme moral authority on earth when they're physically and sexually abusing children, not to mention hanging out with the mafia and money laundering? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And of course, religious people are raised from childhood to believe so that their personality forms around those core beliefs. It takes a real effort of will to look at what's going on in the church and say, you know something, this really kind of sucks. But it is a problem, and it's been going on for a very long time. Now, there was this movie called The Spotlight, and it took place at this newspaper. I think it was in Baltimore. It was in Baltimore, where this sexual abuse by the clergy had been going on, but nobody would talk about it. And there was this special column in the newspaper called The Spotlight, and they said, we've got to cover this. This is horrible. This is being done. And the movie is all about all the pressure that was brought to bear to say, no, 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 don't talk about it. We can't damage the church. We can't. And we were talking about the people like the mayor came on down to the newspaper and said, you can't talk about this. You can't harm the church. Well, the Spotlight went ahead and published anyway, and that is what started the explosion of the current expose, which needs to be exposed. Okay, got to take a break for commercials. Back with a rather interesting story after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, this story is quite fascinating. If you're my age, you probably remember hearing the story of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And it was just this huge conflagration, destroyed most of the city, was blamed on Mrs. O'Leary's cow. Oh, Mrs. O'Leary was being careless. Her cow kicked over the lantern. It set the barn on fire. She couldn't get it out, and the fire went out of control. Years later, a reporter came on out and admitted he just made up the story because he didn't like the Irish. That was left with the mystery. What caused this huge fire that just devastated the city? And there is a new theory out which makes a lot of sense. And it's going to be a little bit scary for some people. And it has to do with some astronomers who were tracking comets. because even back then in the 1800s, periodic comets, the comets that repeatedly came by the Earth, were being tracked. Halley's Comet, obviously, being the example. And there was this one comet that one year was going by the Earth, and they noticed it had split into two pieces. And so it went on its way, and then the next year, on October 8th, 1871, was this huge explosion in Chicago. And the year after that, astronomers noticed one of the two pieces of the comet was no longer visible. And looking at photos of some of the devastation done to the city, it's looking like what really caused the Chicago fire, it was an asteroid impact or a comet impact. Now, we know these things happen all the time. There was Tunguska, which fortunately was unoccupied. There was that huge one that came down over Russia a few years ago. And now we're seeing indications that it may have actually caused the Chicago fire. And Mrs. O'Leary's cow is kind of off the hook. But it is interesting to contemplate. And I went through the PDF I'm going to run some simulations here, but it makes a lot of sense. If you have a comet that breaks into two pieces, and then the next year a city gets destroyed and one of the two pieces is gone, it does make a lot of sense. Now, back then in the 1870s, the exact mechanism by which gravity perturbed the order of the comets wasn't well understood. Anyway, a caller just called on in and said the Spotlight expose was about Boston, not Baltimore. Well, gosh darn those Bostoners here. All right, so the phone lines are open. I can use some phone calls here, 800-313-9443, as we're getting into the end of our show here for hour number 3. So it does make a lot of sense. We know that Earth has been struck many, many times by asteroids. If you're ever out in Arizona, you need to travel east of Flagstaff. There's a very well-preserved meteor crater there. There's a museum on the edge of it. There's a hiking trail down to the bottom, which if you make it down to the bottom and back up, they give you a little patch that says the Bottom of the Hole Club. And they've even filmed movies there. Starman was filmed there. It's very, very well preserved. Others, not so much. But I actually put together a Google Earth map of astroblems, which are the craters. Now, not all of them are obviously visible on the surface of the planet. Many have eroded away. Many have become buried. But the way that you know that they are there is you're looking for a couple of telltale minerals. One is called coesite, and it's formed only under extremely high pressure. But there's a caveat. It can be formed at the roots of uplifting mountain chains. But the one you really want to look for is called suevite, or shocked quartz. And that is a dead giveaway. If you find shocked quartz, you are standing someplace where a honkin' big rock came on down and hit the surface of the Earth. In fact, over in Germany, there is this town that is built inside a meteor crater, and they built the town church entirely out of suevite. And Eugene Shoemaker, who was really instrumental in starting to get people to recognize just how often Earth has been struck by these objects, was in Germany with his wife, and his wife was in a panic. He was going to take out a rock hammer and start breaking off pieces of the church to take home with him, but he didn't do that, fortunately. But he's found all of these astroblems, and there's probably still more out there that haven't been found, but they're out there, and it's a reality that we have to deal with. So it begs the question, first of all, that story that we had yesterday, 4 asteroids whizzed by the Earth, 3 of them hadn't been detected for 24 hours ahead of time. What are we going to do about it? Are we just going to sit there and say, well, here comes the big rock, Here comes another planet killer. And by the way, for those who aren't paying attention, have you ever noticed that of all the planets that we have in the solar system, the Earth is the only one with a moon that is roughly, I mean, significantly the same size as the planet itself. And the reason for that is they think that there were these two bodies that collided. Two planetoids collided. One became the Earth, the other one spun off and became the moon, and that's why they're such similar sizes. Okay, we have a caller on the line. Rick in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing? Yeah, so, a few people know about this, but if you look at the Carolinas, in South Carolina, I'm right near Myrtle Beach, right? But there's lots of signs of many, many asteroids that hit this part of the country. And in fact, most people in the Carolinas know Lake Waccamaw. It's a big lake there, just west of Wilmington. And Lake Waccamaw is just one of many. That was a bigger asteroid, but just in the vicinity of within about 100 miles, I'd say there's probably 100 or 200 asteroids that hit this area. In fact,
that one broke apart. That one broke apart coming through the atmosphere, which is why it created so many small craters instead of one big one. Chesapeake Bay is now known to be an astroblem. Okay. Hudson Bay is known to be an astroblem. And and I know when I was a kid, the conventional wisdom being taught in the science classes, we'll get hit maybe once in 10,000 years. No, it doesn't. It's really a much greater danger. And I do wish that they would start doing some serious thinking about, first of all, detecting these things much further out when it's still possible to do something about it. Because that Russian meteor that came on down, they didn't even see it coming, let alone have a chance to do anything about it. And a lot of it has to do, of course, with the composition of the asteroids themselves. You've got, the iron, the nickel iron ones. Those are they're going to be the toughest to break apart. You have the dirty snowballs. Those are relatively easy to deal with. You have the carbonaceous chondrites, which may actually carry extraterrestrial life to Earth. But how are you going to deal with this? Are you just going to sit here and say, okay, here comes the big rock? But it's an issue that...
in this area, you couldn't avoid it because, you had, 200 asteroids coming in, and they couldn't have broke apart because there's so many of them. So an asteroid might break in 2 or 3 pieces, but I can't drive 1 mile without passing through 1, 2, or 3 asteroid dishes, and they actually give them names. They call it this bay, and they give it a name. Yeah, and they're all over the countryside here. If you look on Google Maps, you'll see them, and they're all going the same direction. So they all came from.
I have an overlay for that. I have an overlay for that on my astroblem map. But you need to understand that when a large enough asteroid is coming through the atmosphere and it heats up quickly enough, it can, in fact, shatter into dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller pieces, which is basically what happened there. In some cases,
that would explain. Yeah. But
in some cases,
explain that. Yeah.
In some cases, they won't even reach the ground.
Sorry.
The one in Russia didn't reach the ground. Tunguska didn't reach the ground. They just exploded in the atmosphere.
I thought the one that over Russia that it landed, they found it landed in a lake.
They found a few pieces of it, but the vast majority of it basically burned up.
Right. Now, you mentioned about the moon, and there's another guy. He has a YouTube video called Planet 7X, but he talks about this this asteroid that hit the Gulf of Mexico. He said that's one big asteroid, and he sort of shows you how you get you get a rim around an asteroid, just like you have the ones here in the Carolinas. Well, same with you got this rim that you can see show up, there, and it was so big. He said on the other side of the Earth, near the Himalayas, a big chunk of the Earth was blown into space, and then that debris formed the moon. I'm not saying I buy that, but that's the way he explained it.
Well, I'm not buying that one either. I'm going with the first theory. The asteroid that created the Chicxulub crater, and by the way, that Chicxulub crater is buried. You can see it with sonic imaging, but it's not visible on the surface there. That was about the size of Mount Everest, and that's not enough mass to throw off the moon, which is considerably heavier. So,
well, to make it a little more complex, he said that this was during the Great Flood, and so he said,
okay.
So that was a little more complex with it. But where he gets the ideas from, I don't know. But if you look at the Central American part, it looks like there was a couple large asteroids that hit. But you can.
Well, it is
you're
possible.
saying that
it is possible to distort a planet with a sizable enough impact, obviously Earth, Moon being one example. But over on Mars, there is this huge depression in the ground in the southern hemisphere called the Utopia Planitia. And on almost exactly the opposite side of the planet is that huge uplifted area, the Tarsus region with all the volcanoes. And it's really thought that that's the remains of the scar of this gigantic impact that literally splashed Mars' atmosphere and water out into space, killing the planet. And of course, the same thing could happen here.
That's possible. Yeah. I would have not liked to have been here when these asteroids hit the Carolinas. You'd have no place to hide.
No, you definitely would not. And the interesting thing, though, is that I lost my thought here. Somebody just actually posted a member's story. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs created the most beautiful underwater caves in the world. And yes, they did. And I mean, astronomy is a wonderful thing. Geology is a wonderful thing. I'm having a really good time in Indiana with the local geology, because Hawaii is just, here's some lava, here's some more lava, here's some more lava, which is great if you're a volcanologist. At one time
I moved away from Hawaii.
Well, Hawaii simply became too expensive. And we have family here in Indiana that we wanted to be close to. And so we're down to the last couple of days here at Santa's Lodge, plug. And Sunday, we're moving our stuff into our new home and then, try and get everything set up and running. And, one thing I did have to leave behind in Hawaii that I'm already missing was my Celestron astronomical telescope. Not that I really have clear skies over the place where we're living, but I could always, drive the car out over by the lakeside or something like that. But I do have my camera gear, my telephoto lenses, and I'm really having a really good. The place is growing on me. Now, today was kind of rough dealing with the internet service people, but overall, I'm beginning to like it, and the leaves are starting to turn. Winter is going to be a little rough. Now, I grew up in New England, and I spent a lot of time in Washington State, so I'm not thinking the cold is going to be as much of a problem for me. But definitely for Claire, we're going to have to go out and shoot her a bear, get her a bearskin jacket.
Yeah. It could get a bit cold there.
Well, deer season just opened. Maybe we'll get her a buckskin jacket.
Yeah. Go get yourself a good buck.
Yeah.
If you can't shoot them, you can always run them over.
Well, actually, where we live ourselves, it's illegal to hunt the deer. Even though it's deer season, it's illegal. The other day, though, we were driving down the road, and we saw a buck, 4-pointer, the doe, and the fawn. The fawn was just the cutest little thing that you'd seen. Wow. So I'm enjoying the wildlife here. It's certainly more interesting than geckos.
In the Carolinas, I hit a deer about a year ago, damaged my my front bumper. But
I can imagine.
I never see a buck anywhere. I only see lots of deers and especially young fawns and stuff. But I never see any 5-pointers or 7-pointers that you just.
Well, that's what the hunters are going after. They want those trophies for the wall here, and most mature, responsible hunters are not going to shoot the doe because that's next year's, the next generation, and they're not going to shoot the fawns for the same reason. So, yeah, the hunters are definitely going for the bucks. I used to have a nice buck head on the wall that I took with a black powder gun, but somebody made me take it down.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, anyway, good talking to you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're coming up on another commercial break here. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And, of course, we wandered off the world of politics and corruption into science and asteroids. And yes, I find this stuff quite fascinating. Now, if you are a follower of travel shows that deal with Mexico, you've probably heard of the expression a cenote. And a cenote is a giant sinkhole filled with groundwater, and it usually starts with acidic rainwater eroding rock below ground level until it forms a deep subterranean hole, and over time the roof of this chamber collapses, revealing an underground lake. Now, the Mayans used these as sources of fresh water. They considered them sacred openings to the underworld. They made offerings to them, which of course has been a boon for archaeologists to find all kinds of treasure troves of artifacts within them. But it turns out there's an odd arrangement of cenotes, and it's actually a ring. It's a semicircle of cenotes with a diameter of around 180 kilometers, and they finally figured out it traces the rim of the Chicxulub impact crater in a near perfect circle. So when Chicxulub came on down, created a heck of a mess. Now, I want to correct a misconception a lot of people have, and that is that when a meteor comes plunging through the atmosphere, it gets very, very hot and can set things on fire. And yes, that's entirely possible. But the misconception is people say, it's the friction. It's the friction with the atmosphere, and it heats the meteor, and it makes it very hot. Actually, no, it is not friction. It is compression. And for those of you old enough to have had a bicycle with a hand pump, and you're pumping up the bicycle tire, you probably noticed the bottom of the pump got hot because compression will generate heat. Well, applied to a meteor on the other side, when it's coming through the atmosphere, the front of the meteor is compressing the atmosphere, possibly creating a shock wave. But in the rear of the meteor, the lee, if you will, there's a vacuum, and the temperature drops there. And so the actual overall ambient temperature of the meteor remains a bit of a constant here. So all these science fiction movies you've seen about a giant meteor impact and it's throwing fire and everything all over, some fire, yes, but not all that much. Certainly a lot of smoke and chemical reaction that you're going to see. But again, looking back at that Russian meteor, they did find a few fragments of it, but a lot of the really big ones, they blow up in the atmosphere like Tunguska did. I'm going to take a wild guess here that the Chicxulub meteor was an iron nickel because they tend not to break up. But there are different kinds of meteors, and there's actually lucrative business. People go on out and they'll find meteors and they'll sell them. There used to be a guy called the Meteor Man online. I don't know if he's still there or not, but it's fun stuff if you live in an active area. Okay. Okay, there is the music. It is time for Claire and I to get on out of here. And stay tuned for John Stadtmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Please spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.